The Money Men, Capitalism, Democracy, and the 100 Years' War over the American Dollar, by H.W. Brands, narrated by Lloyd James. Copyright 2006 by H.W. Brands. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with H.W. Brands and W.W. Norton, and was produced in the year 2006 by Tantor Media, Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Prologue. The Money Question. For the first 5 generations of America's independent history, from 1776 till the eve of World War I, a single question vexed American politics and the American economy more persistently than any other. Political careers were made and broken on this question. Political parties rose and fell. Great wealth rewarded those who answered it correctly. Bankruptcy claimed those who got it wrong. No question touched more livelihoods and more lives more consistently, more intimately, more portentously. The question was the money question. In simplest form, it asked, what constitutes money in the United States? Gold, silver, paper currency, banknotes, checks. This central question raised subsidiary questions. How much money shall there be? Who ought to control it? To what ends? The money question has been a puzzle for every society since the first ancient hit on the idea of employing proxies, seashells, shiny rocks, rare metals, for value. But it was a particular conundrum for the United States during the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries. This period encompassed the emergence of the 2 institutions that made modern America what it is today: democracy and capitalism. From the start, an inherent tension existed between the two. The driving force of democracy is equality, of capitalism, inequality. Democratic equality begins in the political sphere but bleeds into the economic realm. Capitalist inequality arises in the marketplace, but encroaches upon the public square. The money question lay at the center of the contest between democracy and capitalism. The Democrats demanded that the people control the money supply, to preserve and extend equality. Money was too important to everyday lives to be left to self-interested capitalists. The capitalist countered that managing money was a talent given to few, that even if the Democrats were well-meaning, a dubious premise in many capitalist minds, their inexpertise would doom their efforts and destabilize the economy. Besides, money was property, and property needed protecting from the masses. Had the two groups, the Democrats and the capitalists, been distinct, their struggle over money would have been bitter and trying enough. But in America, the two groups overlapped substantially. By the middle of the 19th century, only the archest of capitalists could gainsay democracy, at least in theory. And most American Democrats were capitalists themselves, prospective capitalists, or dependent on capitalists in one way or another. In his first inaugural address, after a brutal campaign fought over the money question, among others, Thomas Jefferson declared, "We are all Federalists. We are all Republicans." Jefferson's listeners knew the Federalists as the party of emerging capitalism, the Republicans as the party of nascent democracy. And they might have extrapolated his dictum to the money question, and concluded, correctly, that in a fundamental sense Americans were all capitalists and all Democrats. But Americans had difficulty keeping their identities straight, with the result that policies and attitudes toward money careened wildly. Capitalism charted the course for a time, then democracy, then capitalism, then democracy. The stormy seas of finance were no place for the faint of heart, but to the intrepid they offered unparalleled opportunities to serve the cause of democracy and the imperatives of capitalism, sometimes separately, sometimes together. In every generation, a few such bold spirits stood out, grappling with the question on which the fate of the American political economy hung. They were geniuses and rascals, statesmen and speculators, patriots and profiteers. They were the money men. Chapter 1. The Aristocracy of Capital. Alexander Hamilton had been impatient his whole life. As a boy on the Caribbean island of Nevis, he ached to escape the stigma of his illegitimate birth. As a 13-year-old clerk in St. Croix, he couldn't wait to find something better. "I contemn the grovelling and condition of a clerk or the like, to which my fortune, etc., condemns me," he wrote a friend. "I wish there was a war." St. Croix taught Hamilton about money and trade. At the crossroads of three empires, the British, French, and Spanish, he dealt in rum and cod and bread and mules, denominated in pounds and livres and dollars, backed by gold and silver and land and promises. But there was rarely enough of any currency so far from the imperial metropoles. "I am a good deal puzzled to fulfill your engagements," he wrote his employer when the latter was away. "Cash is scarce." It remained scarce after Hamilton escaped the West Indies for New York. His break followed a 1772 hurricane that ravaged St. Croix, but allowed the clever young man to gain the ear of the world by penning a graphic account of the storm that was printed in several papers. Good God, what horror and destruction! It seemed as if a total dissolution of nature was taking place. The roaring of the sea and wind, fiery meteors flying about in the air, the prodigious glare of almost perpetual lightning, the crash of falling houses, and ear-piercing shrieks of the distressed were sufficient to strike astonishment into the angels. Perhaps it was the vividness of his portrayal that arrested readers' attention. Perhaps the devotional gloss he appended. "Where now, O vile worm, is all thy boasted fortitude and resolution?" he asked of humanity. "See thy wretched helpless state. Despise thyself and adore thy God." Or perhaps it was his capacity for flattering those in power. Our general has issued several very salutary and humane regulations, and both in his public and private measures has shown himself the man. Whatever the cause, a group of benefactors decided the boy was meant for better things, and sent him to New York for an education. Hamilton hurried through King's College, soon rechristened Columbia on account of the troubles that developed between King George and his American subjects. Hamilton embraced the troublemakers. "That Americans are entitled to freedom is incontestable upon every rational principle," he declared. He enthusiastically endorsed attempts to hit the British where it hurt the most, in the commerce that connected the American colonies to the motherland. This commerce Great Britain has hitherto regulated to her own advantage. Can we think the annihilation of so exuberant a source of wealth a matter of trifling import? On the contrary, must it not be productive of the most disastrous effects? As he would the rest of his life, Hamilton contended that economics ruled the world, eventually, if not at once. The American colonies had been planted as a commercial venture. If the venture proved unprofitable, as a boycott of British commerce would render it, then the colonies' British sponsors would feel the pain. A boycott would bring Britain's commercial classes to their knees, and consequently Britain's government to its senses. But economics acted too slowly for some of the colonists. The boycott acquired martial assistance when fighting broke out in April 1775 at Lexington and Concord between American militia and British regulars. The Continental Congress appointed George Washington, America's most experienced officer, to head up the Continental Army and oppose the British outside Boston. Hamilton contributed from the distance of Manhattan. He harangued his classmates in favor of the rebel cause, aided in the rescue of cannons at the battery from capture by the British, and organized an artillery company of volunteers, with himself as captain. He fought in the unsuccessful defense of New York, made more difficult by the pro-British influence of the city's large number of Loyalists, and in Washington's retreat across New Jersey. His valor and abilities won the esteem of his superiors, of whom 2 offered to make him aide-de-camp. He declined, claiming disdain for the personal dependence such a staff position entailed. In fact, he was holding out for better, and when Washington requested that Hamilton join his entourage, he accepted at once. The young man, he was either 20 or 22, the date of his bastard birth has long provoked dispute, didn't cut an imposing figure. A fellow officer recalled his first sight of Hamilton. "I noticed a youth, a mere stripling, small, slender, almost delicate in frame, marching beside a piece of artillery with a cocked hat pulled down over his eyes, apparently lost in thought, with his hand resting on the cannon, and every now and then patting it as he mused, as if it were a favorite horse or a pet plaything." Yet Hamilton's restless ambition soon won him ascendance over the other junior officers on Washington's staff. He learned to anticipate his superiors' wishes and to supply them better than anyone else, till he became Washington's de facto chief of staff. He shared Washington's frustration at the failure of America's legislators to supply basic provisions for the Army. Folly, caprice, a want of foresight, comprehension, and dignity characterized the general tenor of their actions, he scribbled with frozen fingers from the wind-swept hillside of Valley Forge. Their conduct, with respect to the Army especially, is feeble, indecisive, and improvident. The troops went naked for lack of uniforms. They grew hungry, sick, and mutinous. Many deserted. Hamilton blamed the lawmakers, but also the configuration of the American government, which left sovereignty to the states. Each state, in order to promote its own internal government and prosperity, has selected its best members to fill the offices within itself. The second-raters found positions in the Continental Congress, where they looked out for their states first. Local attachment, falsely operating, has made them more provident for the particular interests of the states. It is necessary there should be a change. America will shake to its center if there is not. Armies in those days took winters off from fighting. Hamilton had time to visit friends and court the ladies. He developed decided tastes in the latter, as he did in most things. She must be young, handsome. I lay most stress upon a good shape, he wrote regarding his ideal woman. Sensible, a little learning will do. Well-bred, but she must have an aversion to the word ton. Chaste and tender, I am an enthusiast in my notions of fidelity and fondness. Of some good nature, a great deal of generosity, she must neither love money nor scolding, for I dislike equally a termagant and an economist. Her politics didn't matter. I think I have arguments that will easily convert her to mine. She ought to be Christian but not Catholic. As to money in hand, the larger stock of that the better. Money is an essential ingredient to happiness in this world. As I have not much of my own, and as I am very little calculated to get more, either by my address or industry, it must needs be that my wife, if I get one, bring at least a sufficiency to administer to her own extravagances. Elizabeth Schuyler met most of Hamilton's specifications, possessing warm brown eyes, an appealing figure, and a very wealthy father. The couple were wed in December 1780. The match solved Hamilton's money problems, but did nothing for those of America. Money had been at the heart of the troubles that provoked the American Revolution, with the colonists resenting and then resisting British taxes not simply on principle, but because they sucked precious specie across the Atlantic. The colonial policy of the British government reflected the prevailing mercantilist notion that wealth consisted of gold and silver, and that these must be hoarded in the home country. The consequence was colonial starvation for money. British coins, rare gold guineas, somewhat less scarce silver pounds and shillings, traded at a premium, supplemented by more numerous Spanish dollars stamped from silver mined in Mexico and Peru. But even with the Spanish money, there were never enough coins, and the colonists resorted to Indian wampum, strings of shells or beads, country money, claims to tobacco, rice, other crops, or land, and finally, paper notes issued by the colonial governments. But the British frowned on the paper issues as inflationary, and in the 1760s outlawed paper money entirely. The edgy colonials soon went over the edge into revolution. The war aggravated the money problems. Trade shriveled under the British blockade, cutting the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?